countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I am in a wonderful committed relationship, but there was a cosplayer girl here yesterday that was fabulous.
Well, don't record this. You'll get
No, you can. It's fine.
Okay.
I've already started recording if you haven't.
Hey, welcome back to the Last Comic Shop. I'm the host of most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by my co-host Chad Smith and this other guy, Mikey Wood. He's some
special guests.
special guest.
Not
that guy.
Help us out.
Why not? You know what? I like you.
Thanks, man.
And I'm glad you're here.
Fond of you guys.
Well, we are here at the Three Rivers Con, and we've spent the whole day talking to great people that make comics. You know,
Make great comics, whether it's people like Howard Chaykin or Pat Olive, whose name I learned to pronounce.
yeah, it's kind of like
Olive.
Olive, except you just put the
I
S's in
have
the
Olive for so long.
Yeah.
I asked him specifically.
See, even you, this comic genius, are learning something today.
Is he from Oleoptics, or is that a different Olive?
No, that's something else.
That
I think.
is Steve
That's a letterer.
Steve Olive, I think.
Yeah.
All right,
I wonder
well,
if they're related. Okay.
yeah, Rick Leonardi we talked to, the great Ron Frenz.
Yes.
Who is one of my definitive Spider-Man artists.
We are friends
With
of
friend-
Ron Frenz.
Oh, he's not gonna like that pun.
Yeah.
He's not. He's got to hate
Brett
it.
Breeding, who also was interrupting Ron Frenz with his evil dagger eyes. That was awesome.
This was cool.
It was. It's been Matt Horak. We got to meet. He ends up being awesome. I did not know that he got into comic books. As you'll find out, he got in because he made mini comics of Thundar the Barbarian, and he would take them to cons and be like, "You like this?" And eventually, Rob Liefeld, your boy, was like, "I love this."
I love some Rob Liefeld.
He worked for me.
Say what you will about him. He is
Okay.
an advocate for comic books.
When do I begin? No.
Be nice.
Did
be
you
nice.
did you read Covenant? That's what he worked on.
No.
That was the Jesus book, right? Or the religious one?
I
don't
think
know if it
so.
was Jesus
Something
in
like that. He said it was like
No, man.
knights
You know
and
what?
swords and sorcery and Bibles.
You may not.
Actually, I
you
think
know-
I do have an issue with that.
Okay. Well,
Like, you may
good.
not dig somebody's stuff, but if they have a passion for the medium, then that's something. That's important. That's something to be respectful of and to appreciate. So that's cool.
Heck yeah, and that's speaking of that, that's what this show, Three Rivers Comic Con, is all about. That's what our show, the Last Comic Shop Podcast, is all about.
Yeah?
Is, respecting comic books and how cool they are and what it takes to make them, and then we get to come to places like this and meet all these great creators, pick up all these great deals, complete my spectacular Spider-Man collection. Almost, I need to go and shake down that one guy for that last issue.
That Cloak and Dagger.
The Cloak and Dagger one?
Yeah, the Cloak and Dagger one.
How much did you want it for?
More than I'm willing to spend, but he told me to come back and make him a dumb offer.
Make me an offer I can't refuse.
I can do that.
Not everything is for everyone, but one of these shows, if you're into comics, you will find something.
Yes.
The difference between these kind of shows, what's cool is, and the difference between your podcast and the Three Rivers Comic Con. Well, first of all, there are 3 rivers. Some Comic Cons have 1 river, but we have 3.
Right.
So it's actually
We're one less than the Four River
no,
Con.
but it's specific to comics. The nature of Comic Cons has actually changed very much in the past 20 years. They've become much more of like pop culture things. With
Right.
Like, Star Wars cast members, or, Dexter cast members, or, Eddie Munster or some shit.
Which,
Eddie Munster. I'm glad that's who you went to.
He's very nice.
Exactly.
Very
Butch,
friendly.
Butch Patrick, but
but there are elements of that stuff here, but it doesn't overtake the whole thing.
Right.
We have the
comics.
501st.
I mean, comics is a carnival industry. It's a carny industry, right? It really is.
It sure is.
It sure is. It comes from its roots in the 1920s, 30s. It was looked at as something was low class originally, right?
that's right.
And it was only for people between the ages of 8 and 16.
That's right.
And somehow, everybody now takes it seriously.
Well, comics got
sure.
sexy. Comics got sexy at some point. Well, I mean, of course, it's because of the movie industry. It got very popular.
Mm-hmm.
Being a nerd, I kind of miss when I was beat up in high school because of comics. I kind of miss that because at least I was part of a small but dedicated group of
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
You're the only one in the world who's ever said that.
I know.
It's never gonna happen.
I do have my thing. But anyway,
Walk up.
We all have our kinks. Don't kink shame here.
Walk
No
up.
judgment.
TV,
But it was,
ladies and gentlemen.
but Chad's commented on that before, that back in the day, when you saw somebody walking around in a comic book t-shirt, you immediately felt kinship with them. You were like, you, sir, I need to be friends with, because there's not any other people out there like this. Yeah, right? You used to say that. You were like, those were my friends.
Whether you like the character or not, you'd be like, oh, that Punisher shirt. I don't like the Punisher, but that shirt's cool. Let's be friends. I bet you read other books.
What
You
else
can't
do
just
you
be all
read?
Punisher.
Yeah.
The downside to this, though, is that a lot of us who were in that small but dedicated and also scared fan base back in the 80s and 70s or whatever, however old you were, sometimes you turn into a bit, we don't, but sometimes people can grow up into like gatekeeping people.
Right.
Who they held it so precious that when they see other people coming from other forms of medium, they feel like either the companies have sold out or these aren't quote unquote true fans, but yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They're just fans in a different manner that came to. I came to my comic book experience through my grandfather, who wasn't into comic books, but ran a newsstand in Newark, New Jersey.
Right.
He hated comics.
Tearing off those covers is
you know,
hard work.
my parents hated me and sent me off to live with him for summers, and I would work with him, and that's where I read comics. Other people come through them from different routes, and we have to respect the fact that the destination is the same destination.
Right. It is a huge tent. It is if you're talking about it being a carnival, it is a huge tent, which makes up all different kinds. And again, it does frustrate me when folks gatekeep in one way or the other. I just don't. If you really do love comics, right, you can't take them with you. If you want people to actually enjoy them after you're gone, then you have to get kids into comics. You got to get kids into comics. You got to get other people into comics, because otherwise they're just watching the shows or watching, and then there's no. I mean, yeah, people say that comic books now are becoming R&D for the next TV show or the next.
They
But you
can be
still
that too.
You still need that. You still need R&D,
Well,
right?
My funeral pyre is going to be built of long boxes, so I am taking them with me. Because I'll be damned if anybody's going to live
It's
high
gonna be
on
a heavy
because of
boat.
Shit, I spend
It's gonna
money
be a
on.
heavy boat.
It is.
But
It's
the
gonna
good
be-
news is it will
Now, I
burn
gotta-
very quickly, Viking style.
That's right. It will burn very quickly.
All that paper.
Yeah.
That's right.
Do you realize submarines don't light on fire very well?
That's true. They don't. They just contain it. Submarines. Long metal tubes filled with semen. You're going to cut that.
But in any case, so yeah, we've had a great time at the Three Rivers Con, and the rest of this show, you're going to hear a lot of great interviews that we did. But one thing that we wanted to talk about was what was your favorite pickup thus far? I know you talked about Spectacular Spider-Man. I mean, I'm going to talk about the fact that I finished ROM. I finished ROM at this show. Not only that, but I got ROM #1 for $10. For a tenner.
And that is one of my favorite parts about the cons, is you bring all these retailers together, and you could really shake them down. It's not like eBay.
right.
They're seeing all the competition out there.
Oh my God, eBay, where they say or best offer, and they don't accept that.
No.
They had no intention of accepting best offer.
Right.
My dad always told me that when you go out on a date, you're going to wonder if you're going to get laid that night, and the girl already knows, right? And
Yeah.
that's true, and you should respect that. That's what or best offer is.
I
They
think-
don't have any intention.
Yeah,
I didn't know where that was going.
Right.
Exactly.
That's fine. You'll cut that as
That's
well.
that's a left turn. No, this is all staying in.
The surf
this
and
is
the turf,
This is
Mikey.
a live. This is a live show. Like
Oh,
this is
good.
This is live.
Aren't we lucky? So yeah, Rom, you finished Rom.
I did finish ROM, and
did
I
you
started some other stuff.
Oh, what did you start?
I started Machine Man. I kept on talking to everybody about it, and I'm like, you should read this Machine Man. It's so good. Aaron Stack. And so I was just like, I believe my own hype. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it now. Do you realize, like, seriously, this is just me now talking comics, but everybody should read it, because Steve Ditko came in after Jack Kirby didn't know where he wanted to go with that series.
Yeah.
And he comes in and he works with Tom DeFalco, and he immediately puts Aaron Stack, who's a robot, in a 3-piece purple suit and sends him to work at an insurance company. Because you got a robot working at an insurance company.
That's accurate.
Just trying to sell, insurance to human beings. And immediately it goes back to the Silver Age. It's just a Silver Age book in the middle of the 80s. And it's so fascinating. If you take it outside of, like,
Wow.
it's like a time capsule.
See, I'm only familiar with him through Windsor Smith and then through Next Wave.
Right.
Next
No, I mean,
Wave!
was it Next Wave?
Yes. Yes.
That book was Agents of Hate.
But
That's
It's
the
like
best.
Shakespeare, but with lots more punching.
So good. So good.
But that's what I told you. You have to read that because all the characters from the Machine Man 2020 series come from that Steve Gitt, because Tom DeFalco worked on that too.
Super important note. Do you still need issue 10?
I do.
Because there's a guy right before the door.
There's
There's
a
a
guy
guy that has a little box labeled comics. It's very unassuming. I'm flipping through. He has issue 10 in there. I didn't know if he had it.
Okay, well,
And
good.
it's still there. But that's the kind of stuff you can find at this show. You want to come to a place like this and all of a sudden start your Machine Man collection?
Yeah,
You know,
you should.
You can shake them down for issue 1, and then you can find the other guys that have them in the cheapo bins.
Yeah, we were talking about US 1. I'm sure you can find issues out there.
I was going to say, the gem of this show is I found out that Ron Frenz helped co-create Super Pro.
No. Yeah, that's true. I did talk to him. So
NFL Super
And
Pro.
he speaks of it with pride.
he does,
And
and I would too. It's a very interesting outfit, and it incorporates all of the great aspects of both pro football and comic bookery.
And as much as I would love to tease, 9-year-old me bought an issue of Super Pro.
Yes.
And so
Yeah, no, I did
there
too.
is no room for judgment.
Right.
Wow.
Sure how much audience speaking was, but as far as trying to keep track of issues, I forgot before coming to this convention which issue of Paper Girls that I don't have.
Okay.
You gotta
And
write
for the
that down.
past 2 days, I've been trying to instruct my partner where to look in my stuff.
yeah.
Be like, no, I think it might be the last issue. We're
Yeah.
not holding the issue right now. Okay, do we know if we have issue 10? I don't even know what to look for, but I know I'm missing one thing in that run.
Yeah, I got an issue of the first issue of Howard Chaykin's Black Kiss, and I wanted my wife to get it. I don't want her to open it and read it. I love it,
Right. But you don't want her to look
It's
at
a very
it.
grown up. We'll say it's a very grown up.
It's a
book.
very mature book.
very mature book.
Right.
Yeah,
Not
that,
like the Howard Chaykin work he did with the WWE, which was for 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
that was a great.
That was a great conversation.
That for me, this con for me has basically been a 2-day meeting with Howard Victor Chaykin.
Yes.
And that's all I've spent my time doing is talking to that man. I'm sure, and actually, he hasn't thus far said he's sick of me yet. So he already
Situational kindness.
Yeah, he's
Mikey.
very polite.
He already treats me better than any of my family members ever did. So like that has been. I mean, it's eye opening. Like we just sat in on this panel an hour ago before we started. Incredible. And so my favorite piece that I got a head sketch from him of Janusz Prohaska or Black Hawk
Okay.
that I'm going to put into my Black Hawk omnibus that I had library bound on my own, which he was very impressed with.
Okay.
And it's just like, you know, the stories where they say never meet your heroes because
Right.
they disappoint you. That is not accurate with Howard Chaykin.
Okay.
He's everything you expect him to be if you've ever read interviews with him or read any of his books. And that is another experience of Comic Cons that is wonderful, is being able to meet these people whose work means so much to you and to be able to tell them that. And generally speaking, unless you're Adam Hughes or James O'Barr, you're happy to hear it. You know, they are happy to hear it.
Well, yeah, the fact of the matter is, comic books, it is that kind of industry where I think people are grateful when the fans come out. And I've never had a negative experience with any of the comics pros.
Yeah.
They're all genuine people. And it's just so great to come and meet the people that, you know, oh, that guy killed Superman.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy helped put Spider-Man in the black suit. Like, and they're all just here. They're just regular people, regular folks hanging out.
Yeah.
And happy to have conversations about it.
And it's always funny to talk to these creators because most of the time we see it as something groundbreaking and important to us, and every issue we've ever read means something to us, and we know what comic we bought when we were where and what.
Right.
But to them,
The
it's a
twinkle.
gig.
The
Yeah,
twinkle.
Like, to them, it's a gig.
Yeah.
It's
know,
that paycheck they got on
Their
March
work is a
17th.
payment. But if you ask them what got them into it, they turn into us.
Right.
And they tell us what their favorite, you know, the first time they saw a Wally Wood piece, or the first time they saw, it may not even be a comic necessarily. Or I mean, some of these guys, their first experience with comics were like golden age books.
Yeah. Well, it again, I mention it all the time. There's a twinkle in your eye when you start thinking about the comics that you grew up as a kid. And that's why I always ask, and you'll see it on some of these interviews that we did here today.
Well, not see it, but you'll hear it because it's an audio.
This is a podcast, so.
It's true. I have a face
Well, why don't
for
we,
radio.
we actually do have a bit of an audience, so audience participation. Let's say we'll start here. What was the first comic you remember reading?
First one.
Probably Superman. I'm more into horror and, you know.
Sure.
Right.
Like EC stuff, yeah.
Yeah. But still, there was something, right?
It was a-
and then
it
I
was
like
a-
your hat, by the way. It says "F- suits on it. That's great.
I got that here, actually.
That's super cool.
As soon as I saw it, I had to have it. Probably between that and Tales from the Crypt.
Okay.
Cool. How about you?
Oh,
Do
the
you remember?
Crypt
I have it literally right over there. That 2099 Spider-Man 2099 that I got.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's beat to crap. It was in my toy box.
Right.
For years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine too. It has all the spine ticks, and
Oh,
it's
it's so
definitely
good.
And that-
CGC would never grade that thing, but that doesn't make it any
But
less
like
lovable.
every mark in there was put in by you somehow or another, and it's yours. Like for me, I read Archie's and shit. Like I said, my grandpa's thing. I would read Archie, Little Red Hot, and like Richie Rich. But the one that changed the way I looked at things, funnily enough, was a Batman Special #1 with art by Michael Golden. The
Yeah, that's
first and
gorgeous.
up to a while, the only appearance of the Wrath, but I think he's been back. That's it.
Yeah.
What was yours?
Well, I mean, I always tell the story about how I have this framed on my wall, which is a reprint of the first appearance of the Lizard, Spider-Man fighting the Lizard. But believe it or not, I had a moment yesterday where I remembered that I got into comic books even before that issue. And that's because I went to a dealer, and he had the small digest
the pocketbooks.
pocketbooks that were released in the 70s. My older brother had one of these, and it was like the first 6 issues of Amazing Spider-Man. And I remember being 3, maybe 4 years old, and my brother was like 10 years my senior. So if there was a thunderstorm, I'm running and I'm going to sleep in my brother's room because like I'm 4 years old and I don't want to, and he would always be accommodating. He'd be like, all right. And so he would always have it by his nightstand. And so here I am in thunderstorms wanting some reassurance. He had a flashlight by his bed. I pick it up and I just start looking at the pictures of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And I fall asleep. I'm at calm. I'm at peace with my universe. And so I found it for $12 and I picked it up and immediately flooded back to me.
And that's
all that twinkle that I talk about.
And they sell, and that's what these Comic Cons sell, nostalgia. There's nothing at all wrong with people. Some people say that nostalgia is bad. Like I had an Empire Strikes Back digest of those. Now I just remembered that. So what's yours, Chad?
Yeah, what is yours, Chad?
So for me, I don't know. I go back. I had a handful of comics before the Batman movie came out, but that's really whenever I decided, all right, I'm going into comic books. I traded all my baseball cards away. I was like, all right, these, not only can I collect them, but they also have pictures inside that I can draw. But once that happened, I had a cousin who was like, oh, you like comics? Take these. And he just like threw a bunch of Amazing Spider-Mans at me. And they were some of the Gil Kane, Ross Andrew, Jerry Conway Amazing Spider-Man issues. They were some of the best comics around. There's some that you can see on the dealer's walls with the $100, $150 price tags on them now. But I was able to cut my teeth on some of the best Spider-Man comics. In addition, that was the time that the Todd McFarlane era of Spider-Man, like Todd McFarlane, Eric Larson, those issues were coming out. So I had those. I had the Norm Brayfogle Batmans, the Jim Aparo Batmans, and so like I was able to get the best of both worlds. I was able to get the cool modern stuff. I was able to get the cool classic stuff, and the stuff that tied into the big movies that everybody was talking about. That's when I was like, no, this is it for me. This is like baseball cards they were fun to like. You open up the pack, you're like, oh, there's the excitement.
Yeah, here's my Ken Griffey Jr. card. Yeah.
But then it was over. With the comic books, I could go back to those again and again. And, I learned to love drawing the pictures, and I loved the stories. And it was just, there was so much more value there. And it just never stopped.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get to the rest of this show. Right after this commercial break, we'll be back with our first interview of the program. It's going to be a great interview with Matt Horak, followed by another interview with Ron Frenz, who we talked about. So make sure you tune in more to the Last Comic Shop right after these commercial breaks.
And thank you, Three Rivers Con, for having us.
Yoo-hoo!
Hazel always knew there was something special about her cat Mooney, but she's still shocked when Mooney opens his mouth to tell her he's just had a vision. An ancient evil has awoken after centuries of sleep, and only one man can stop it, the legendary warrior Beowulf. Unfortunately, it's been over 1,000 years since he slayed a dragon, and he's been reincarnated as this guy. His name is Victor, and he's more unemployed millennial slacker than mighty warrior. Go to monarchpublishing.net for a free sample comic.
Hey everyone, Brian Thomas here from the former The Batman vs. James Bond show and the upcoming The Night Cave show. Do you like noir, black and white gritty murder mysteries? Do you like crime stories or even pulp comics? Then you're gonna love Nick Palatichuk's debut graphic novel entitled The Greenway. It's 1968, and Butch Schultz, a black market merchant, finds that his friend has been murdered in a mansion in St. Paul. Now he is out looking for who did it, while the city's best detectives are on the case. Nick's graphic novel is already getting rave reviews, let me tell you. Zero Supervision Comics podcast says, a dark, intriguing story that makes you want to know more. The Glenn Thinks Stuff podcast says, it's explosive, captivating, and alluring. And actor Kyle Hester from The Chair, Zombie with a Shotgun, and Preacher 6 says, can't wait for this book. You gotta get on this. Order your copy today at Indie Planet, A New World of Comics. That's www.indieplanet.com. Hard copies and digital copies are available, and now digital copies are only $5. That's where I said it, just $5. So make sure you order yours today.
All right, we're here at the Three Rivers Con with Matt Horak. So, Matt, how's the show been treating you?
Pretty good. Enjoying myself. Drawing some pictures.
What are you drawing at the moment here?
Drawing Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld.
Oh yes. Oh yes. From I think what early mid to early 80s.
Yeah, probably. I never read it. Let's see. Is there a date on here?
Oh,
85.
85. Yeah, it's still 75 cents. So that was when you could pick up a comic book for under $1. I remember those days.
That's probably when I started going to the comic shop on my own.
Yeah.
Around then,
and that's what we like to try to talk to when it comes to creators, where you kind of came from in terms of your love for comic books. So where did your particular love of comic books kind of sprout from?
Well, I always loved comic strips and the paper, and I loved Tintin. I got into Tintin comics when I was really young.
Very nice.
And then from there, just picking them up at the Lawsons on the corner, and then comic stores, and just kind of went in full bore.
Do you remember what the first Tintin story that really captured your eye was?
I think my grandma had them. I had cousins who lived in Canada. I think that's where they came from.
Okay.
And they were at my grandma's house, and it was like the crab with the golden claws. That arc or whatever.
Right, with Secret of the Unicorn, and then into Red Rackham's Treasure. Yeah. Yep. Oh, that is a great. In Red Rackham, you get Tintin riding in a little sub, and it's a lot. That is a good story arc. But so from there, as your comic books grew, was there a particular artist that you kind of really latched onto, or a couple artists that you really latched onto, and said, as your style progressed, maybe you were like, I kind of like that. I know everybody's individual style comes from somewhere, and there's influences. What were your influences?
Probably Art Adams, Mike Mignola, and Michael Golden.
Okay.
Are my three favorites, I guess.
Have you ever got to meet any of them?
I have met all.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I just did Fan Expo Cleveland with Michael Golden.
Okay.
Forget where I met Art Adams, but I had a little mini comic I did.
Okay.
And I, went and met him, and I said, I've always loved your work. I want to give you this. And he's like, oh, great, here, I'll trade you one of my sketchbooks. And he gave me one of his sketchbooks.
Wow.
It was like, okay, which is really cool. So.
Very cool. Yeah, no, that is awesome that you got a sketchbook from one of your heroes in the industry.
In trade.
Yes.
For my little photocopied thing.
Well, still, you gotta.
I know. Well,
that's the great thing about the industry. People like to trade art, and if they dig your stuff, they'll give you some stuff in return. And so that's, I guess, the next question. As you're growing as an artist, where did you first really, would you say, got your feet wet in the industry? Where do you think, for those people maybe listening that are, maybe younger, trying to say, I want to break into comics. How did you kind of break into the comic book industry?
Well, I was trying to do it for years, back before the internet, going to conventions, showing my stuff to anyone who will look at it, getting feedback, learning how to draw comics.
Okay.
And so I was doing sample scripts and trying to do my own comics and stuff, and kind of getting frustrated, and years and years go on, and I ended up becoming friends with P. Craig Russell, who lives in Kent, Ohio. I'm from Akron.
Okay.
They're right next to each other. And so I was talking to him about that, my frustration with it, and he said, well, why don't you adapt something? So I transcribed an episode of Thundar the Barbarian, the cartoon.
Oh, nice! Nice.
And
with Ookla.
yeah, Ookla the Mock and Ariel, Princess Ariel, and transcribed an episode and made a comic out of it and made little mini comics.
Okay.
And just gave them to everybody at shows.
Right.
And I just, I did 6-8 pages at a time, so I'd have a new one every time I did another show.
Right.
And eventually, people started to remember me because it was a great thing. They'd go, "Oh, Thundar," instead of going, "Thanks," and aside. And eventually, Rob Liefeld, I got in touch with him, and he liked it, and I did a book called Covenant with him.
Okay, yeah.
For Image, which was a sword and sorcery Bible epic.
Very cool.
Yeah. So that was my first job, showing I could do the job, and then I eventually met other editors, and then Marvel gave me some stuff. And since then, just working on
it was a great idea, kind of adapting Thundar. And I love the idea of you adapting Thundar in mini comics, because Thundar is such a kind of like a He-Man kind of clone. They came out around the same time. But it's a great series, because a lot of people know that Jack Kirby did a lot of the designs, and he worked with Steve Gerber on the Thundar. Mm-hmm. So that has a lot of pedigree in terms of people that know comics. They're like, that was something that you should be. So that was a great idea. So if you're out there, take it from Matt Horak. Maybe try adapting something that, maybe in even mini comic form, because it's very digestible, 10 to 12 pages, and it's very easy to draw. Yeah,
and now you could just put it online. There's lots of artists who have broken in nowadays by doing their own fan comics, and eventually, catching, if it's good enough, somebody will give you a job.
Well, the one that I wanted to talk about, because it's one we covered on the last comic shop just a couple weeks ago, is Norse Mythology. You mentioned your friendship with Pete Craig Russell. I'm guessing that's how you might have got on the book, or maybe something along those lines?
Yeah. He had, he was, for those that don't know, Craig adapts the prose, and then other artists come in and do the finishes.
Right.
So when he was gathering artists for it, he put my name up for it.
Okay.
I assume fought for me.
Well, it's you do wonderful work in that book. Was it intimidating at all to work with Pete Craig Russell on one of these books, and knowing that it's Neil Gaiman and it's going to get a lot of eyes on that just because of Neil Gaiman and Pete Craig Russell's name in the industry? Was it intimidating at all, or were you like, nope, this is just another job for me?
No, it was very intimidating. And then the pandemic happened in the midst of me doing it, too.
Right.
So that kind of threw it for a loop, and actually maybe worked in my favor, because I got a lot more time to work on it and kind of could settle into it and figured out what I wanted to do with it, because I use some washes, which I don't always do.
Right. Well, what did you think of when you were doing that book, and the fact that, again, a lot of Norse mythology characters, you don't see them really outside of comic books, but you see them a lot in comic books.
Yeah.
You just have to look at Marvel and the things that they've done over the years. And again, with Tales of Asgard, Jack Kirby adapted a lot of the same stories that are in Norse mythology. How did you feel about kind of making your art look a little bit different from the stuff that's already been out there with some of these classic characters that you might have seen other places?
It was fun. It's a little challenging to put your own stamp on it, but at the same time, that you want them to read as those characters. And Craig had done some really good designs for stuff, and I got to design a couple characters.
Which ones did you get designed?
The two dwarves, Fjalar and Galar or something. I can't remember, and that's not even how you pronounce it.
Right.
But
our listeners know, because they probably listened to that episode.
Go listen to, which I listened to, the Neil Gaiman reads the audiobook.
Okay.
Norse Mythology. So he has all the pronunciations in there.
Wow.
So that was interesting to be able to listen to the chapter I was drawing while I was drawing it.
Very cool. Well, what projects do you have coming around the bend that you might want to plug for those people listening to the podcast?
Well, I recently did some Infinity comics, the scrolling comics for Marvel's for the Unlimited app.
Okay.
Juggernaut, Deadpool in X-Men Unlimited, and a couple Spider-Bot strips. So those are fairly recent. Those are out there if you have the app. And then I'm doing some stuff with Marvel Scholastic right now.
Oh, very nice.
That I don't know that I'm supposed to talk about. So.
Well, I will say this. One of the things we really do promote here on the Last Comic Shop is trying to get young kids interested in comics. That's why we do our Panel Pals section of the show. So again, you teaming up with Scholastic, that's great stuff. That's, so make sure that if you're out there, parents, and you see Matt Horak on some of those Marvel Scholastic books, make sure you pick him up because he's a fantastic artist. And thank you so much for taking some time to talk with The Last Comic Shop today, Matt. We love your stuff, and again, we'll see you in the funny pages.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're here at Three Rivers Con with Ron Frenz.
Is that really the voice you're going to use?
Yeah, that's the whole time.
Sounds like somebody's grabbing you.
It's the voice he has. It is. It's the only one I got. I was born with a certain voice for radio. I have a face for radio, too.
Radio and a voice for television.
That's
All right.
Anyway, sir, thank you so much for taking some time to talk on The Last Comic Shop. The one thing that we always ask, how did you get into comic books? Were you a fan of comic books growing up? Like, do you remember, like, what was the comic book that really captured your imagination the first time?
Yes.
Okay, what was it?
I have a brother 3 years older.
Okay.
And he and I have had this discussion a lot. The nearest we could figure, the earliest comic book we remember was a World's Finest comic.
Okay.
From 1964.
All right.
With Jimmy and Robin faking their own deaths, and Batman and Superman standing in front of stone graves, mourning them while they are in the background going, and I just recently rebought a copy of it
Okay.
to refamiliarize myself with it.
Did it hold up?
Thank you. No.
They never match the covers. They always had such problems. The memories are so much better sometimes.
Kurt Swan did the cover, man. And I think he did the insides too. But anyway, no, that may be a bit apocryphal, but that's what my brother and I have that's become common knowledge for us, is that it was somewhere around there. But everything changed for me. We were big Batman fans, the Batman TV series,
right.
George Reeves TV series, all the cartoons in the 60s, the Filmation, Superman,
yes,
Superman Aquaman Hour,
right.
Batman cartoons.
That was supposed to go on a little bit longer. They were supposed to bring in like Wonder Woman and a lot of other, but then they canceled it, and then they, I guess, moved over to Hanna-Barbera.
Super Friends, yeah. For me, though, everything changed when I discovered not only the Spider-Man cartoon,
yes,
but I started trading with a friend of ours and got some Marvel Tales, some of the early Ditko stuff.
Nice.
And the first Spider-Man I bought off the racks would have been number 60, with Kingpin swinging Spider-Man by his ankles by John And I never looked back after that. I became a huge Spider-Man fanatic.
Yes.
And if you asked 7-year-old Ron Frenz what he wanted to do when he grew up, it was, I want to get big, I want to work for Marvel Comics, and I want to draw Spider-Man.
Well, there you go. Done and done and done.
And I won the big last. I got big last. But it was.
Uh-oh. Brett Breeding's throwing bombs from the table next door.
Anyway, he's just hurtful. Anyway, I mean, I was pretty directed. I mean, I took a commercial art course at Vogue Tech last 2 years of high school.
Right.
I won a scholarship, a half scholarship for a 2-year course at the Art Institute, and paid for the rest with loans and grants. And I never lost my direction of wanting to do comics.
Right.
But I had a couple of really good instructors that made me realize, what if you don't get into comics? You should at least train yourself to do something else.
Do something else.
Field. Yeah.
What did you think you might do if you didn't get into comics?
Some kind of graphic design, storyboards. I mean, I ended up getting a job in an animation studio doing storyboards and in-betweening.
Okay.
Which, made use of the same muscles, but is a very, very different mindset.
Right.
Animation itself takes so long for so little.
That 24 frames per second.
It was never really something that appealed to me because of my love for comics.
Right.
And I worked for the animation studio for, a year or so when I finally got a call from Marvel, and that turned into freelance that I would only take if I could do it and keep my job at the studio.
Okay.
But when they offered me 6 months worth of Spider-Man, filling in for John Romita Jr., I figured it was safe to leave the studio, and I went full-time freelance, and luckily never had reason to look back. I've had a couple of lean years between gigs, but more than not, it's been a great ride.
Yeah, your Spider-Man work, your Thor work, your Spider-Girl, all of that is just fantastic. Yeah, I wanted to say that, You know, when I was growing up, you were one of my definitive Spider-Man artists, because when I first got into comic books in the mid 80s, it was right after Secret Wars,
Right.
and you were drawing Black Suit Spider-Man. And to be honest, if it hadn't been for me having a VHS tape of the 60s Spider-Man cartoon, I would have not known that Spider-Man actually had a red and blue
There you
costume.
go. See?
Because, and afterwards I would look back and I'd see some Steve Ditko. You had such a Steve Ditko-esque Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But it was
that-
still modern for the 80s.
Right,
As
but
coming
he was lanky. He was. You could see the musculature. Like it was really what. I mean, again, like John Romita bulked him up and made him like look a little more. But I just love the way that you drew Spider-Man, especially in that black suit. Now, I remember being in a con with you a couple years ago, and you were telling me the story about the first issue of Amazing Spider-Man with the black suit, with him coming down, and you were like, they weren't sure whether or not they wanted to keep the black suit or something?
Oh, no. In fact, the editor-in-chief was very sure that he didn't want to, because this was, I mean, you got to remember, this is the 80s, the mid-80s, before the internet, before email, before all that. When it was announced in the fan press that he was getting a new suit, they didn't show the suit. So everybody hated that idea, naturally, because the red and blue suit by Ditko is genius.
Oh,
I mean,
it's one of the best in all of comics.
Absolutely. So everybody hated the idea of Spider-Man getting a new suit. So Jim Shooter called Tom DeFalco into his office, and he said, when's he getting the new suit in Amazing Spider-Man? I said, 252. Get rid of it, 253, because we're getting hammered. And Tom made the argument, mostly logical, that he didn't get it until like issue 8 of Secret Wars.
Right.
And, that was another 8 months. He said, we at least have to hang on to it until he gets it in Secret Wars.
Okay.
And Shooter had to agree with that.
Yeah, you have to
So
sell
he-
those toys.
So what he said was, okay, you keep it until he gets it in Secret Wars and then dump it the next month.
Okay.
Now, in the meanwhile, in those intervening 7 months, everybody saw the suit and loved it.
Yeah, it turns out it was actually a really cool suit.
Yeah. Everybody loved the suit. We were still always planning on bringing back the red and blue.
Right.
But then, Tom DeFalco came up with the idea that it was a symbiote, and they got rid of it using Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four. But at that point, all the mail was so positive that that's where the idea for making the cloth version and having him switch between them and everything, that's where all that came from, because everybody loved the black suit once they saw it.
Yeah, I mean, it is a gorgeous design, and, it eventually got Venom, which, it just became natural, that look would eventually be still popular today.
Yeah, well, and they still do Mac and Black every once in a while.
Yes.
Somebody
the
must have put Mac
symbiote
Black suit. Even if it's not the symbiote, they'll put him back in a black suit for one reason or another. He's really angry, so he goes and wears the black suit.
Or Todd McFarlane.
He's got to bust some heads. He woke up on the wrong side of the bed that morning.
Somebody's mean to Aunt May.
I mean, Michelini came up with the whole Venom.
Right.
But that doesn't happen without the groundwork you guys laid down.
It does.
Well, it doesn't work without DeFalco deciding it was a symbiote. But, that was something that they had been building to for a while, where, there was a mystery of somebody pushed Pete in front of a subway train or something, because the spider sense didn't pick it up. Yeah, originally it was going to be a woman, so there was a lot going on there, but, it gave us Venom, so what the heck?
Yeah. But your career has given us a ton of wonderful stories. Is there anything that stands out for you personally that you're like, this is some of my best work?
I'll tell you the truth. Everything I work on becomes personal once you get to know it. DeFalco and I always discuss the character.
Even Super Pro?
Even Super Pro. I will not apologize for NFL Super Pro. In fact, I got a pitch revamping, retooling Super Pro that I would love to talk to the NFL about.
Oh, I would love to see him fight those Fox robots.
Because I cannot afford to license it. So, I wish they were willing to publish their own book. But anyway, no, it is. It's one of those things. So the standout stuff are the things that co-created Thunderstrike and Eric Masterson, which, so that was very personal. The 2 years we did that book. The MC2 stuff was very close to me.
Yes, yeah.
Tom was editing all three of the MC2 books, so I was much more involved in the plotting of A Next than I was with some of the other projects.
Okay.
Until like Spider-Girl and stuff. And so Spider-Girl itself, anything that you have a real vested interest in co-creating.
Right.
You want to see your kids do well and thrive and be popular and things like that.
Well, those MC2 books, they were so great. Like the fans just wouldn't let them go.
Well, Spider-Girl especially, they were always predicting her demise, and she ended up going 14 years and change with all the different versions, and they still talk about her today. So that's where that's great goal is for them.
Wouldn't be surprised to see her pop up in one of those Spider-Verses or whatnot.
Right. I would love it. I would love it. I would love for Mayday to get some airtime. In fact, I mean there's a lot of talk, and it's only talk.
Yes.
Spoiler alert, with Toby coming back in the last in Far From Home, there's if there's interest in doing a Spider-Man 4 with Toby and Kirsten Dunst,
right?
Oh, a Spider Dad.
Introducing Mayday would not be a bad idea.
No, it would not. It would make a lot of sense.
It would make for one heck of a movie, Sony.
Yeah. Cough, cough. Hint, hint.
And Toby looks good in a beard too. So.
Well, that was the one last question I had for you, because again, you seems like you love Spider-Man. And I just wanted to, ask you, what was your favorite issue of Spider-Man that you drew? Like, that stood out? Because you said that you got personal with all the books, but like, if Spider-Man's your favorite character and you always wanted to grow up drawing Spider-Man, was there one you were like, yeah, that's the issue that like, boy,
in deference to the other half of my brain, Todd DeFalco, one of them would be the Kid Who Collects Spider-Man.
Okay.
That was Roger Stern.
Yes, it was.
Everybody was on fire that issue. And Terry Austin did a fantastic job. Bob Sharon did it. Christy Shield colored it, I believe.
I was hoping you were going to say that, because that's one of
a terrific job.
My favorites
Joe
too.
Rosen did a terrific job. Everybody was on fire in that issue. For single issues during the course of our run, I mean, we did the Hobgoblin stuff, so that was a lot of fun. There was an issue called Whatever Happened to Crusher Hogan.
Okay,
I remember.
That
Was my pitch to DeFalco, and I was really, really pleased with how that came out, just as a character piece. And Tom is a great partner for that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Anything that involves Pete. I mean, we just recently, there was a one-shot called Spider-Man Self-Improvement that went back to the roots of the black suit in the lead feature, and we did a 10-page backup story called With No Power. And it was a character study of Pete and this other character. Anytime we get a chance to visit with old friends, it's great fun.
So very good, very good.
I do love the character, and I've been very, very fortunate. I am the luckiest guy on the planet. I have no defense for that. I have been blessed.
And final question, very serious question. Do you want to talk real quick before we go about the Right Project?
It was a crowdfunder that DeFalco and I did through Apex Comics, and it exists. The books are out there. There is still talk about getting some distribution to comic shops. Right now, it's not available in comic shops, but it was a labor of love, a little dream project that DeFalco and I put together with Sal Buscema and Bob Sharon and Glenn Whitmore and Jack Morelli, and I had the opportunity to kind of put together my dream team.
That is a dream team.
And we had a lot of fun with it. There are other stories out there to be told, but whether they're distributed through Diamond or whether they're through crowdfunding is yet to be determined.
Okay, well, we wish you nothing but continued success with that. I can't wait to see it.
And right back at you guys.
All right, well, thank you.
Good luck with everything you do here.
Appreciate it. Have a great show, sir.
You too. Thank you.
All right, here's some more interviews. We've got a great interview with Howard Chaykin, so stay tuned for these right after these commercial breaks.
was the three-legged dog of comics.
It was bad.
These two gentlemen met in jail, and then when they got out, they started publishing.
It should have been mobsters instead of doing what they're doing in comics.
Management there was questionable at times.
Some of it has to do with people who go to jail.
We are sinners. We have corrupted the youth. Stuff that should never have been sold to kids.
And then there was Charlton. I couldn't quite tell what they were doing.
Charlton was just a hodgepodge of weird titles. What is this? Who am I dealing with? John threw nickels around like they were manhole covers.
CATAP. They were cheap.
Hell yes, they're cheap.
They were a special kind of special is what they were.
Critic was horrible.
You could smell them beginning to decay even as they were rolling off the press.
At one point, they actually did have to move the comics operation into a bowling alley.
It's something out of a sitcom.
We want to publish comic books in the worst way, and they did.
It's been called the street-fighting cousin of Marvel and DC. Maybe you've heard of them. Probably not. But you do know the industry legends that called it home. This is Charlton Comics. Follow at charltonmovie.com.
Oh, that's good to see.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we are sitting here with the eminent Howard Victor Chaykin. You know, just to get the fanboy crap out of the way.
It's okay. I know you also like work by guys for whom I have utter contempt, so it's okay.
That's true. I'm bound to. Your first issue of Shadow changed the way I was reading comics, which is cool. So that's pretty fantastic. So what I wanted to ask you, your mentorship was done under the great Gil Kane.
Among others, yes.
Among others, right. But apparently you heard of the opening due to an unfortunate coronary that someone had? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'd like to hear.
Gil had a guy working for him whose work I've seen, who was on his way to a real career. He looked sort of like Woody stuff in a Woody sort of way, and he was 21 or 22, and he died in his sleep of an undiagnosed heart ailment.
Oh my!
And because children are callous and unfeeling, I called Gil up and said, "I hear your guy died. You need somebody." So he hired me, and I had no skill set. I was his gopher, and even then it was problematic because he was embarrassed by my physical appearance to deliver work because he felt that by delivering work to the office, I would represent him badly. Because I had hair down. I looked like every 18-year-old kid in the late 60s. I had hair down on my shoulders. I wore cowboy boots and blue jeans and work shirts. I looked like a faux proletarian, or a proletarian.
So that now, one of the things that we do on the last comic shop is that we talk about how everyone was brought into it, and usually people were brought into comics by a comic that they experienced themselves. So you had mentioned before that you were about 4 years old when you had your first issue. Do you happen to recall by any chance the one book that you saw that made you think to yourself that you wanted to do that?
Not in the least.
Not at all.
It was a completely holistic experience.
Okay.
It was more a matter of there was a sensory response to this volume of shit. I mean, there were hundreds of books in this, and they were literally dumped in there the way you dump into a dumpster. And I was sitting in them. It was like Scrooge McDuck in his vault. And no, it was just the entire experience of that smell, the color. Some of them had covers torn off because they've been read so many times in the toilet by children, and it was just it. I mean, the entire zeitgeist of the experience informed my future in this business in every way.
Can I hop in and ask a question about Hey Kids Comics?
What about it?
So I'm curious. I know you're the type of person that doesn't mind pissing people off from time to time.
I have now and then.
But how was that perceived amongst you're one of the elder statesmen of comic books now, where you've worked with some of the greats along the way, as well as the young folks that have come up since then. What was the reception in the comics industry for you from Hey Kids?
Generally very positive. Maybe because they weren't reading very closely. But I mean, most of the people I discussed in the first volume are dead.
Right.
And and I don't really. A year and a half before I did the book, I put out a call for any anecdotes from people that might be fun to incorporate, and every one of them, annoyingly enough, turned out to be a settling of scores. And I actively did not want to be in the position of settling scores. That was not what I was seeking to do. And I had some guy accuse me of that very thing, and I unfriended him immediately because you. That's not who I am. I settle scores face to face. I don't need to do it in print.
Respect that.
And the second arc was a bit of a navigation experience because it refers to people, in many cases, avatars of people who are still alive or recently dead. And I haven't had any heat from anybody, and most of the people who've read the book of my colleagues have responded to it as a statement of some bitterness and truth. And I said more than once, some of it didn't happen, but it's all true.
Right.
You know, I mean, I was not seeking to do a documentary. Rather, I was doing a roman à clef. There are obviously characters in the book who are direct avatars of real people. They're also, for the most part, conflations. You know, combining backstory of one guy with the front story of another, building a character who has no resemblance actually to the actual character, but is in every way. And that really played. I mean, for example, I'm working on the third volume right now, and at least one instance, I'm combining a writer-artist team into a single person.
Okay.
Just because I don't have the room to address the hostility that existed between them, as well as the result of their working together relationship in the context of a larger narrative.
So it's just easier to.
It would require. I don't really want to invest 2, 3, or 5 pages in that problem.
Right.
When I'm more interested in using the problem that ultimately evolved from their relationship as a part of the narrative arc.
I will say, as a comic book fan, reading the first trade, it was homework for weeks for me. Just trying to Google who could have been involved there, and like.
Why would you bother? I mean, I know why you'd bother, but it's a rhetorical question because you're obsessed with getting dirt on people.
Well, that too, but no, it's so great to hear some of these stories from the industry from people that have been in there, and even
look, nobody ever hung anybody out of a window.
Okay,
that never happened.
I thought that was Alex Toth.
No. It never happened.
It probably should have.
That's it. It is wishful thinking and it's aspirational. It never happened, but it had to be included because it is so exclusive and intrusively and desperately needed a part of the story that everybody knows that story, even though it's just not true.
Right, and it's entrenched in the industry. It's been told for generations. So, are you going to deal more in the third volume? Because I know you've hopped around from decade to decade. What's volume 3 going to?
Volume 3 is about fandom.
Okay.
And about the concept of mania.
Welcome to the Comic-Con.
Yeah. Well, no, not really. I mean, because conventions show up in both the first 2 arcs. It's more about. I open with a general, panel-to-panel discussion of the concept of mania.
Okay.
I had an actual liberal arts education, so I learned stuff in school, and so there may be things here that nobody has any idea what I'm talking about. I talk about the tulip frenzy of the Netherlands in 1634 to 1637. It was the first major financial boom and bust, a bubble, when tulip stems were going for the price of a house. I talk about the riots that took place in Astor Place between two competing fans of two competing productions of Macbeth in the 1830s, when people were killed because there was an English version and an American version. And I talk about the Frank Sinatra craze, the Sinatranism, and about Hamilton, which I regard less as a theatrical phenomenon and more as a modern version of mania. There are people out there who only seen one musical in their lives, either Spamalot because they were Monty Python fans, or the Book of Mormon because they like South Park. Hamilton is a show for white people to feel better about themselves for 20 minutes after the show. And
they're so cultured now.
They could say they listen to hip hop for 2 hours.
And it's a white person frenzy. My daughter-in-law, who's not a theater person at all, has seen it 3 times. She's never seen a production of Guys and Dolls, Oklahoma, Carousel, My Fair, anything of the canon.
Right.
Okay. And this was reinforced I'm digressing. A couple of nights ago when I watched a documentary about Stephen Sondheim, and I watched Lin-Manuel Miranda completely mischaracterize the intention and meaning of a song of Sondheim's from Company called Barcelona. Completely mischaracterizes its point. And I don't know whether he was bullshitting or believed what he was saying, but it was just completely wrong.
That's when people start to prescribe how they feel about something as what that thing is, and that's not necessarily.
And I'm watching this with my wife, and she looked at me and says, "Really?"
Yeah. So now you mentioned contemporaries of yours, like I love Alex. So
Alex is not a contemporary.
Well, he's a.
Alex is my father's age.
He's
he's dead.
That's why he is dead. I used the wrong terminology.
You sure did.
Influences or
Alex.
elders.
Alex is an influence. I mean, I'm of the mind that that being influenced by Alex Stowe doesn't mean drawing like Alex Stowe.
No, right, correct.
You know,
his storytelling.
not even that.
Yeah.
I think it's the way he makes a picture.
Yeah.
I don't think Alex knew a story worth a shit. I mean, Alex had some of the most infantile understandings of narrative as anybody I've ever known.
There was a really good 3-volume. I don't know if you ever read those.
I did the introduction to
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And I wrote the review of it on Los Angeles Review of Books.
I didn't see your review. Did you enjoy
you weren't
them?
paying attention.
I know. I read the. Well, did you enjoy them as they presented his story?
You want to read the review?
I do.
I mean, the review starts out comparing Alex to Orson Welles and ends with comparing him to Phil Spector. And I think the comparison to Spector is more apt because Spector, like Alex, was able to infuse meaning and effect into what is basically treacle and junk. You know, Phil Spector's 3.5-minute singles are teenage junk, but they are majestic in their beauty. Yeah. And the same thing is true of what Alex was able to do with those 6-page romance stories and crime stories that he did for Standard. And I'm a huge fan. You know, I got into it with an academic who felt that Krigstein was a better artist, and that he felt that Toad tended to look like Hollywoodized sheet patina. And I said that the two things are very different, and that Krigstein was an intellectual who saw opportunity in a narrative form that for which the audience wasn't available. And I can empathize because I mean I overestimate the audience all the time. The audience is an idiot, with all due respect.
Yeah, no, I'm taking.
I mean, Krigstein didn't understand why, for example, Krigstein was the most roundly disliked artist DC had. DC. Everybody hated Krigstein's stuff. It was too cold, it was too graphic. And they all loved Williamson stuff and Woody stuff. And Engels stuff.
In their defense, that's good stuff.
Yes,
but I also feel that as I've gotten older, I have no interest whatsoever in the science fiction books. And I look at the shock suspense stuff, the liberal hysteria comics, the crime suspense comics, and the war books. That stuff it still holds up. You know, when I was talking to this 17-year-old kid who told me how much he loved Spawn, I explained that that's the sort of stuff I grew into when I got a little older than 17.
I appreciate it. Non-comic book related though is you're a lover of jazz.
I am.
And could you, off the top of your head, top 3 jazz albums everybody should have? I mean, because there's this. I mean, you know, there's the standards everybody knows.
All right. Well, yeah, I would say the Blanton Webster Band, the Ellington Band from 1943. And this is in no order. Count Basie Decca's, which is the original Old Testament band, and Birth of the Cool.
Awesome. That's fabulous. That's fantastic. Anybody want to ask anything?
Well, no, you've covered so much in your career, whether it was,
There's
Star
so much
Wars.
to cover.
Yeah, Star Wars early on, and American Flagg. Like, what are your feelings? I was just rereading American Flagg last night, the first couple issues. It still holds up and is still prescient for things we're dealing with today. Like, how do you feel about that, reflecting on it so many, however many years later? Like, have you gone back and looked at it recently? Or?
No. When I do, I'm kind of embarrassed because I see all the flaws, I see all the chinks in it, I see all the graphic problems that I didn't solve, all the glib writing. I mean, it's hard for me to get excited about it again. I mean, look, I'm very proud of that work. Let me tell you. And I recognize the fact how influential the work was, but the work had no impact whatsoever on the audience. And the only impact it had on was the talent. It was a hugely influential book in the way people wrote and drew. It opened doors for people in ways that they had no idea that doors needed to be opened for. And it was and it was also funny. I'm a great believer in the Jack Cole theme of thrills, chills, and laughs.
Now people look at it as if it was. I had somebody tell me that it was a cautionary tale, and I don't I mean, was that the intention? I mean,
No,
it's turned into one, unfortunately.
But for me, it was. I mean, I'm a lifelong Democrat.
Yeah.
You know, and I was so blatantly outraged by the Reagan administration that I was just, you know, I mean, things were shitty then, and they've gotten shittier. You know, which is kind of exciting.
Unfortunately,
you know, it's here we are in shitstorm city, and it just seemed to me that we were heading toward a culture that, you know, when Andy Warhol said about 15 minutes of fame, what it ignored was the fact that everybody wanted to be famous for an hour, and that they were easily distracted by the need of attention. You know, and I'm astonished more than I care to admit by my visits to what are perceived as cultural halcyons, and wondering what the hubbub is about.
Right.
You know,
Zeitgeist is a weird thing.
I watched all of WandaVision, not because I wanted to. I found it banal and pointless from the beginning, and overacted. And that Catherine Hahn is an actress I used to respect. But I watched it all the way because my editor I have a joke waiting for you when it's done. I watched it all. He told me the joke. I remember neither the show nor the joke. And I was, when I saw the Batman, I didn't quite understand what everybody was so wrought up about, either positively or negatively. It just struck me as a perfectly sturdy way to spend an hour and a half, stretched over nearly 3 hours. And I don't have an appetite for fantasy and science fiction anymore, despite the fact that I'm kind of dry watching at the arrival of season 3 of For All Mankind on the 10th, which is to me the archetype of cheating on reality. And science, I mean, I like I said about Tom Dish, you know, and you know, most superhero comic books are science fiction stuff dressed up with spandex.
Yeah, your approach to superhero stuff is very refreshing. I mean, it's refreshing because you take different takes, like Son of Superman, which is scripted, is one version, and the superhero basically shot around the corner, but with superheroes.
Right.
Beautiful, but it's an aspect that you think other people would have thought of at some point. And you know people talk about how groundbreaking you are and your work is, and I believe that's true, but I think it's just because you're telling stories that you think somebody else would have told at some point.
Look, I mean, when Conan was at Dark Horse, they asked me to do a Conan story, and I came in with a story about King Conan, the old man, and how his courtiers were about to replace his primary courtesan with a younger woman. And the story is about the older courtesan murdering the younger woman and pinning it on the younger woman's boyfriend. And it struck me as a perfectly good Conan story.
Yeah.
And the Conan franchise is like, this is really weird. I don't know. Okay.
Sword and sorcery talking about. Well, I mean, Howard had his way of telling stories, and they were all kind of pretty straightforward, I think. But,
well, I have you seen The Whole Wide World?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, I mean,
that's.
I love that picture so much.
So I wanted to, just really quickly, because I swear I'll leave you alone after this. I've been here all weekend. I've told my wife that basically what I've been doing is loitering at your table for 2 days straight.
So I should feel stalked?
Yes, you should.
Or heard.
In a good way. In a good way.
Or heard.
That's right.
I'm being seen.
Well, yeah. I have seen in those books that I also love that you wrote the introduction to the first one of, and I will read the review of. He had a couple of shadow pieces in there, and I
love that stuff.
They were fantastic. Was that from a pitch or?
No. Alex was a guy who was always available to be betrayed by people he loved. You know, if it wasn't Noel Sickles, it was Robert Fawcett. You know, if it wasn't Kenneth, it was Warren Tubbs. And the watermark of Robert Fawcett's career was done for Collier's in the early 1951 to 52. He did 12 illustrations for 12 new Sherlock Holmes stories, ostensibly written by Adrian Conan Doyle, Arthur Conan Doyle, but actually written by I believe it was George Herman Cox wrote them. Okay, and they are astonishing illustrations. They're brilliant. I mean, they're pivotal. They're landmark work in narrative illustration, and those shadow pieces are very much of a piece of that attempt at narrative illustration.
And they review there. It was literally a shadow. It was just such a striking graphic.
There were 2 or 3 in there.
Yeah, they're really nice pictures.
They're beautiful. They're astonishing.
Well, I think we've soaked up enough of your time, and I want to get a couple of autographs. So I thank you, and I appreciate all your work. No problem.
I'm most grateful.
Yeah.
Thank all of you guys.
Yeah, well, thank you.
You were fun to play with.
Yeah.
And you were reasonably well behaved.
I'm glad you never get sick of people telling you.
All right. Well, that's the end of the Last Comic Shop podcast for this week. I hope you enjoyed all of our fantastic interviews that we got here at Three Rivers Con. And yes, we will have more awesome stuff next week with our kind of like a regular show. You know, a book review and some recommendations for you. Do we have recommendations? Do you have a recommendation for us, Chad?
My recommendation is to seek out any cons in your area. I know the world has been crazy for the last 2 years plus, but it really has been great getting back. And Three Rivers Con was great because it wasn't overcrowded. There was enough room to have your space and feel safe. There's so many great friendly comic creators out there, so many people selling prints and selling great books. But after the past couple of years of craziness, I think it really is great to get out there and be part of the comic community in places like this. So go find a con and get back out there.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation, Chad. And as always, make sure that you check out us every single week over at the Last Comic Shop Podcast. You can find that awesome website over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. It's a terrific place where you can find all of these awesome evergreen reviews. You like Star Wars? We got Star Wars comics that we cover. You like Doctor Strange? We did that. You like Ms. Marvel? We did that this year. So yeah, we got all kinds of stuff. As well as YouTube, where we've got terrific interviews with comic book creators. We do awesome stuff through our Quick Hits program, where we try to promote Kickstarters and all kinds of stuff, as well as comic book unboxings and action figures and stuff. Yeah. And where else can they find us, Chad?
We're on the social media at Last Comic Shop on Twitter and Instagram. But I think we need to get going. They're pulling up chairs.
That's right. They're pulling up chairs. We got Jedi training coming into this room.
Being invaded by Jedi.
Exactly.
We want to leave now.
These are not the droids you're looking for. Anyways, make sure that you come back next week. I was the host with most, Andy Larson. I was joined by Chad Smith, as well as the wonderful Mikey Wood. And we hope that you stay safe, stay con-worthy, and remember that you can always find friends at cons. What? Really, that's why you can find Ron Frenz at cons sometimes. I hope he doesn't kill us for all these friends puns.
He's heard them all before, he told me.
The Last Comic Shop was a 2022 Black Angus production.